talking about Moses and Aaron talking to Pharaoh. And last week we talked about the plague where all the water in Egypt turned to blood, and then where lice and frogs came up and covered the whole country. And that meant the whole country, everybody, of all nationalities. Again, Moses went to Pharaoh and said, God wants you to let his people worship him, to go worship him. And Pharaoh said, nah, we're not going to do that. So Moses said for Aaron to stretch his rod out over Egypt. And when he did, a swarm came on the country. And that's what the original word translates to, a swarm. We believe it was probably a swarm of blood-sucking flies. But we don't know absolutely for certain. It doesn't much matter. It was nasty, whatever it was. Can you imagine flies just covering everything till you couldn't move? The surface is black with flies. And you can't worship in pagan temples if you're covered with flies. You can't offer sacrifices that are covered in flies. And one of their main gods, the goddess of fertility, had a fly's head. So this was another strike from God directly at their gods. They actually had several insect-based gods. And possibly the swarm was a mixture of several different insects. Yes, sir?
Why do all the Egyptian gods seem to just be people with heads?
I don't know, but they do seem to be that. The flies were pretty nasty. Pharaoh called Moses and said, all right, sacrifice to your God. And Moses said, you know, we can't just sacrifice to our God. We've got to leave town to sacrifice because our God is going to require us to make sacrifices that's going to offend your people, and they'll stone us to death. So we've got to go where they can't see what we're doing. And Pharaoh said, no, you're just trying to run away, so we're not doing that. Interesting thing, there were no flies in the part of Egypt where Israel lived. Up to this point, the plagues have affected Israel just as much as the Egyptians. But this plague did not affect the Israelites. They didn't have flies. They didn't have bugs. The next plague that hit was that and Moses warned Pharaoh ahead of time. Pharaoh is making the Israelites work harder because of all of this to punish them for Moses asking for them to go worship. God told Moses to warn Pharaoh, and then that the next plague would be a disease that would hit the animals. And we don't know if this was anthrax or hoof and mouth or something that we've never heard of. But whatever this disease was, it killed all of the Egyptians' cattle. So their camels, their cows, their sheep, their donkeys, their horses. The Bible doesn't mention goats. I assume it killed those too.
Egypt has goats.
Everybody has goats. But it killed all of the animals of the Egyptians. It did not kill the Israelites' animals. It didn't even touch them. They didn't even get sick. I assume as soon as the plague was over, the Egyptians went and bought animals from the Israelites so that they could have milk and wool and animals to carry their loads and stuff, which would have greatly enriched the Israelites for them to buy their animals from them. Then Pharaoh still won't let them go. So Moses said, okay, the next plague that's going to happen, he took some ashes and he threw them in the air. And when he did, everybody in the country, all the Egyptians, broke out in boils. Now, a boil is a painful skin infection. Kind of like a pimple, but bigger and more painful. And everybody broke out in boils all over. Pharaoh called for his magicians to repeat this plague, and they couldn't because they were in too much pain from the boils. The Egyptians had a god, I back up a little, they had a god with a cow's head that they worshipped. Well, she obviously couldn't keep her animals alive. She's not really a god. They had a couple gods that were gods of medicine, and their gods didn't do any good to heal the boils. So God is taking out one small group of their gods at a time to prove that he is the supreme God. Then Moses went to Pharaoh, and he said, okay, we're giving you 24 hours notice. We, me, Aaron, and God, are giving you 24 hours notice. Get all your people and all your animals inside of houses and barns, because it's going to hail. And if they're left out in the field, they're going to die. So, all of the Egyptians who believed Moses brought their servants and all their animals into barns and houses. The Bible doesn't tell us if Pharaoh brought his servants and animals in or not, but some of the Egyptians did. They brought their animals and their people into shelter, and it began to hail. And it wasn't just a regular hail. This hail not only had hailstones large enough to kill people, it had fire mingled in it, according to the Bible.
Hail made of ice.
Hail, yeah, it's falling ice. At our house, when it hails, they're usually teeny tiny. Sometimes they can get quite big, and this was big hailstones that were falling. You imagine that hitting you on the head. So it killed anything that was outside during the hailstorm, man or beast. But the Bible also says that fire fell with the hail, and the barley was just beginning to bloom. And barley was the grain used for both sacrifices and for the poor people to eat, because it's a heavier, stronger flavored grain than wheat is. And the hail and the fire completely destroyed the barley crop. So there was not going to be any barley, no bread for sacrifices. And there were several gods of the Egyptians that were supposed to be gods of the sky, gods of the weather. Well, obviously they couldn't control the weather. The true God controlled the weather. Finally, Pharaoh said, all right, stop the hail, you can go, you can go. And Moses said, you know, you're not going to let us go, but I'll pray and it'll stop. And it did. It's interesting, it didn't hail in Israel, and part where the Israelites were. It hailed in all the rest of Egypt. But the Israelites were fine. No hail, no fire, no problems at all. So God is taking care of his people. He's protecting them. He is punishing the people that were treating them wickedly. And he is proving that he's the one in control of everything, and there aren't other multitudes of gods like the Egyptians were worshiping. Yes?
Even if I didn't believe in God, I still would have brought my servants and animals in.
Why take a chance, right? Let's sing our song.